for me, energy was a real challenge a few years ago. I actually went through a self-induced energy trough. I've been pushing myself too hard, too long, and not giving my body enough time to recover from the things that I was doing. I didn't do the things that I now tell everybody they need to do. Recovering the adrenal glands, the journey back from that.
Hello and welcome to the Super Soul Model series. This week's guest is Rich Ellis. Rich is widely known as the energy coach, who is a leading expert in energy optimization, energy performance, and of course, well-being. With nearly 2 decades of experience, Rich has helped thousands of people and business owners unlock their full potential by making small, sustainable habits create big results. He's here to share us wisdom on avoiding burnout, building high energy cultures, and how tiny daily habits can lead to massive transformation. Welcome to the Super Soul Model, Rich Ellis.
Fantastic. Thank you, James. Very, very good to be here and great to connect. Thank you.
It's a joy to have you. So, Rich, you've built a reputation as the energy coach. And so what's inspired you to focus on energy work, and, how's that affected your personal journey? Because, this is massive about your approach of how you've been helping people, and what's your background on that?
Yeah, I think the reason that sort of stuck and has remained so is that for me, energy was a real challenge a few years ago. I actually went through a self-induced energy trough, and I just realized that it was the things I was doing that had put me in that place. And I realized that I needed to find a pathway out of that. And that pathway involved a whole bunch of self-discovery and research and understanding how the body worked better. And so that took me down that path
What part of the body was not working for you? Because, audience
well
members are
well
tuning
so
in and they're thinking, God, I've had that.
yeah, so specifically the HPA axis. So that's a technical term which I don't like to use jargon, but when you start off the explanation, you need to, I think, and then you can simplify that into understanding that our adrenal glands that sit on our kidneys are responsible for a lot of they do a lot of work, and their job is to fire the right hormone levels into our bodies to create energy for us. But the messages come from the brain. So the hypothalamus is the master clock. It tells it's on duty, making sure it's aware of what's going on. It then communicates to the pituitary gland, and the pituitary gland then talks to the adrenal glands. So there's this chain of communication through from here to the adrenals. And essentially, I'd been pushing myself too hard, too long, and not giving my body enough time to recover from the things that I was doing. It was a combination of work and a combination of training for events. I've always been into exercise, and that enthusiasm was too much. I didn't realize where the off button was,
So you're an
and I sort of,
overachiever.
well. You could say that. You could say that. But I just think, and the way I describe it, I was my own worst coach.
Yeah.
I didn't do the things that I now tell everybody they need to do. And I suppose the journey back from that, recovering the adrenal glands, and to explain a little bit further about how all that works, when our cortisol levels are higher because of the stress we put our bodies under, there's a feedback loop in our system that says, those like levels are sitting quite high. We don't need to manufacture as much. So the brain then down regulates the manufacture of that cortisol. And so what ends up happening is once you've got to a point where your cortisol's high, it then starts to drop off. And but the manufacturing facility has been down regulated. So you then get to a point where you don't have any energy, and you sort of drag yourself out of bed in the morning. You drag yourself through your day, and then you get to the end of the day exhausted and start the process all over again. And so I wanted to work out how on earth I'd got to this place, but also how I could get myself back out of this place. And so I ended up doing things like yoga, more restorative activities that pushed me into a parasympathetic state rather than a sympathetic state. So that's
Yeah.
the two sides of the autonomic nervous system. And so the energy coach just stuck because I had I had been in this place where I had none, got back to a place where I had a healthy, more balanced hormonal profile.
Can I just
And
interject there? This is quite an important thing because I
yeah,
believe that lots of people find themselves in these types of situations, but aren't fully conscious that this is how they're feeling. Well, they know they're not feeling great, but at the same time, they're
mm,
like, well, I don't
mm,
know what the symptoms of what's going on, and you've been able to
sure.
quite understand like the science and some of the symptoms here.
Mm, mm,
So
mm.
out of 10, if ten's like high energy, where were you? Were you like at one or
Good
two?
question.
Yeah,
Great question. If 10 is bursting at the seams, I was probably about a 4.
right.
So I could operate, but I wasn't operating with enthusiasm, and I wasn't operating with the joie de vivre that, I should have in a role where energy is a really important component, and it's a tool for enthusiasm and passing on,
Yeah.
uh, the things that people want, and it is a currency, really. It's a currency of health. And when that energy isn't there, then you feel like your wallet's empty and you haven't got you're not really sure where to turn. So yeah, you're right. People do experience it, and people do not necessarily know what it is, why it is, how it is, and it can affect their brain as well. So it's not just a physical thing; it can be a mental thing as well. So yeah, so my mission is to empower people with this knowledge so that they can tap into all of that learning that I had to go through and look after, protect their energy so that they never gets to a 4. They're always sitting at an 8 or a 9 or a 7 or an 8
Mm.
or it's always going to fluctuate, but pushing yourself to a point where you get down to a 4, something's gone wrong.
So a question like I guess one of the first things that help us restore is sleep. May I just ask,
Mm.
some of these challenges that you're having because, I'm fully aware the audience could also be thinking, oh yeah, how's this going for me? How was your sleep during this period?
Yeah, yeah, really good question. My sleep was okay. I certainly wouldn't say it was poor, but I think what I didn't realize, what I didn't know, what I didn't know. And so I wasn't as aware of the importance of sleep and the components of getting good sleep as I am now. And one of the things that I did was I bought myself an Aura Ring. And the Aura Ring gives me a whole bunch of data that I never had previously. It's a useful wearable. And having got those insights, I realized that I just wasn't sleeping enough. So I was going to bed 10:30, 11 o'clock, but I
Sure.
was getting up at 5:30, and that's just not a big enough sleep window. So I wasn't giving my body enough time to restore itself and get back to 100% for the next day. So I was always starting on the back foot. And so, you know, it was about understanding that and realizing that I just needed to make a few changes. And as a result of that, that did make an enormous difference. So, yeah, the sleep wasn't as good as it could have been, and I was just not giving it the respect it deserved.
Yeah. So the question
Mm.
really now sort of is how long did this period of, operating at energy levels of 4 and perhaps below on some days. How long were you living in that period? Because some people
Mm.
find
Mm.
themselves in that. How long was that for you?
I would say that was a good year or so before it was distinctly different. And that 4 was sort of, a thing of the past. So, yeah, a good 12 months, maybe even 18,
Okay,
before I was in a place where I felt like I could do whatever I wanted to do without thinking twice about it.
okay.
Yeah.
And
Mm.
these are the kind of again some of the symptoms that people like write in and speak about because energy obviously is a currency, and I love the way you brought that up. But how are the other areas of your life flowing, or yeah, or not flowing during that period of
Mm.
time? Because the red flags are up there, and you're thinking, oh, what's going on? Yeah. So can you just give me just a general? What was the rest of your life? How was
Yeah.
that? How was that going at that time?
Yeah, really good question. It was quite challenging at that time because my because there wasn't enough energy there. I'd burnt the candle at both ends. I didn't have the reserves and the calmness required to have good conversations, to treat my family with respect, to not lose my temper really quickly. Those were things that I noticed. I was quite snappy. I couldn't sort of see the wood for the trees sometimes in terms of, let's say, walking into a kitchen that needed all the dishes doing, like someone hasn't done the dish, and so I'd just lose it. And just simple things like that when I look back, it's like, oh my God, I was horrible to be around. That's not a nice person. And I think that's a sign and a symptom of the state that I was in. And at the time I didn't really think about it too much, but now I look back and, you know, having had some time to reflect, I realize really where my energy was at, my personality was at, my demeanor, my day-to-day demeanor just wasn't balanced. And I was just sort of scraping through and losing my temper at the most ridiculously small things. And yeah, it's not a nice place to be. And I think, when you start to see those things happen, they're good signs that something else is going on, that you need to step back and go, hang on a minute, this is not how I normally operate. What's going on here? I need to do something different.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your honesty. The audience can relate to unconscious behavior because you don't even
Mm,
know that you're doing it. When I first started meditating over 2 decades ago, I didn't recognize or realize that I had an alcohol addiction. I didn't know. I was only
mm,
26 or 27. I didn't even know
mm,
because it was just something that we did as a society and as a group of friends.
yeah.
But when it just got way too much, I was like, I'm doing the same thing every week and I'm feeling this low. And then just as I'm coming round that evening, I'll do it all again. And you're thinking,
Yeah.
this is a loop of lunacy. And we as human
Yeah.
beings find ourselves often stuck in it without knowing what to do until we have some self introspection to go, I don't want to feel
Mm,
like this anymore. I
mm,
want more
mm.
out of life, but I'm not feeling it right now and I don't know what to do. I guess one of the things that came to my mind, which is what I want to ask you, is in my own experience, I found that energy is closely tied to mindset, which is kind of what
Mm,
we've just been talking about, and
mm.
awareness. So how do you integrate mindset shifts into your coaching and how you've been helping people? And how can that sort of mental awareness help improve someone's energy that's listening?
I think it's about asking the right questions. So as a coach, it's about understanding where somebody is at and then asking the right questions, because as a coach, it's not your job to tell them what they need to do, but it's to identify where you think there may be some opportunities, but then lead them down the path of self-discovery by the right question. And so from a mindset shift point of view, it will be questions like, well, where are your energy levels at? How does that feel for you? Does that feel optimal? And I think if they're answering those questions in a sense of, no, I'm not where I want to be, then at least they're identifying the gap themselves.
Mm,
And then when that gap's identified, then as a coach, you can lead them down. Well, what sort of things do you think we need to do to help restore that, to fill that gap, that energy gap, that mindset gap? And so that asking them to think about it is usually enough of a mindset shift for them to be able to see what's missing, find the behaviors that need to occur to plug the gap, and for them to then understand that that's the sort of person that they need to be to have those behaviors in place. And in a sense, the mindset comes with that because they have to start behaving like somebody different. And so the mindset shifts along with that process. They become, as James Clear talks about in Atomic Habits, it's about identity. So it's a vote for the person you want to be. And so
yeah.
every time you practice those habits, you're voting for the person you want to be, and that mindset goes with that, and that that personality or that new behavior becomes part of that person. So that's usually the process that I follow. It's about drawing it out, asking the right questions, and helping them realize that you know, you usually know as the coach why they'll tell you why they've come to see you, but they don't necessarily know the path to get to where they want to go to,
Oh,
right?
of
Which is
course
why
not. Of course not.
they come to see you.
Yeah.
So yeah, that I think, does that answer the question, James?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I'm always thinking with the audience, someone listening right now,
Hmm.
like they're thinking, well, I might be at about five, and it's just like, well, what do I need to do? I know I need to do something. And I'm
Hmm.
hoping that by listening to this conversation, I might have some practical tool. I've said thousands of times across all my content, the thing that jumped me from being on an addictive, unhealthy route was starting a meditation practice.
Hmm.
And I
Hmm.
didn't even know what meditation was. I just thought it was something someone might have done in a cave. I hadn't a clue.
Yeah.
Uh, and I just didn't know what it was, but I didn't recognizing it was just being able to sit still for a segment of
Hmm.
time every day.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I just thought it was the most rebellious thing for me to do because I was like, sitting still, I ain't going to do that. I've never sat still. Probably in my youth, I could have been called ADHD, but didn't know it. I just had copious amounts of energy, but it was all over the place.
Hmm.
And I
Hmm.
found for me, when I sat down to learn how to meditate, all this resistance in my body just began to dissipate. And
Right.
this mind just became open and receptive to really good
Hmm.
ideas and phenomenal amounts of energy, more so than I remembered as a kid. And I was able to focus for such longer periods of time. But at the beginning, it was like a rocky road, like the aeroplane
Hmm.
taking off,
Yeah. Yeah.
shaking, 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 resisting the change of
Yeah. Yeah.
moving to this healthy version of myself rather than the unhealthy version. But it was so quick
Hmm.
because one habit led to another and led to another and led to another. And before too long, still 2 decades plus later, I'm still doing all these lovely little small habits and noticing my vitality and energy has been phenomenal. So I guess my next question to you, Rich, is, you've just mentioned that changing one identity to the next is really, really powerful for someone who
Hmm.
is starting their transformation or wants to get out of that perhaps 4 or 5 level of energy to get to at least the higher echelons of energy and good feeling, right?
Hmm.
So, what are some practical steps could they take if they're at a 5? And then maybe there's some
Hmm.
different
Hmm.
ones if you're at a 6 or a 7, right?
Sure.
Or even
Sure.
higher.
I think the important thing is to make it as easy as possible. So, not looking for five things to do, but looking for that one thing to do.
Mm.
And it's going to be different for everybody, but we've talked about sleep already, and it is the foundation of health and well-being, right? Everything else that we do builds on top of a solid night's sleep. And Matthew Walker, who's kind of one of the world experts, says that, it's the tide that raises all health boats. So that is the place that I would start with most people. Not necessarily everybody, but at least I need to find out about it. Because there's no point in talking about nutrition if sleep's poor, right? Because that has a big impact on the results you get with the right nutrition.
I love the way
So
you said that. I love that. That's so true.
yeah, yeah,
But can you
and
just,
the same
but
goes
tell us
same goes with
why? Just
exercise.
tell us why
Yeah, sure.
that's
Yeah.
really important because I think everyone needs to know this.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. So, when we're underslept, the impact that that has on our next day or days is phenomenal. And there have been studies to show that people who are underslept eat more food the next day, and usually the wrong food. So not only will your brain be searching for energy in the simple carbs, but your brain will also be, preventing you from stopping doing that as well. So you've got ghrelin and leptin, so your two hunger hormone, your two sort of satiety and hunger hormones that play a really important role in what we eat and when we eat it and when we stop. Those both go out of whack, so you get a double whammy.
Right.
The other reference that I was sort of had in my mind that related to from a nutritional point of view is that when we're underslept, our brain sacrifices muscle before it sacrifices fat. So we want to lose fat if we're getting healthy, typically. But our brains won't let us do that if we're underslept because it's harder work to break down fat than it is to break down muscle. So, in the attempt to eat healthily, we are restricting calories, but if we're underslept, we're actually losing muscle mass, which means that our metabolism is slowing down, which means that over the period of time, we aren't going to be able to lose the fat that we want to. So it's a really critical piece to get the sleep part right first before you start layering on what interventions need to occur from a nutritional point of view. And second to that is the exercise side of things. So we've always thought exercise and nutrition are, the most important the levers to pull from a health and well-being point of view, but you've
Yeah.
got to start with the sleep first. We're less likely to go out and do the thing we should do to move our bodies when we're underslept. We just aren't going to have the same amount of energy. And therefore, if we don't do it, we're not going to have as much tiredness, physical tiredness at the end of the day to have a better night's sleep, because that physical tiredness plays into having a good night's sleep. So that becomes a vicious cycle as
Yeah.
well. Because we don't get the energy, we're not going to do the thing, and the thing isn't going to help us get the better sleep, and on it goes. So those are two sort of, I guess, answers to that
Nice
question is
explained. But if we're
how
gonna
to do it.
so if we really need sleep, and that's going to help the nutrition, which will also give us the energy, hopefully, to move the body. Do you have any practical tools that get a good night's sleep? Because it's more so than just getting in your bed. There's got to be something. What are Rich's
Good
practical
question.
tips?
When I present on some of this stuff, I always put this 888 up on the slide. I've got 888. So we've got 24 hours in the day, 8 hours of work, and people sort of start scoffing. They're like, "Really? 8 hours of work?" But 8 hours of work, 8 hours of me time, and 8 hours of sleep. And I put that up and I say, which is the most important? And 90% of the people go, sleep, sleep, sleep. Everyone realizes the importance of sleep. And I say, no, that's not the most important one. The most important one is the me time, because the me time is what helps set you up for the sleep. So to answer your question, one of the things that I do is I make sure that I like this analogy of how does the pilot get the plane on the runway? He throttles back. So how do you throttle back? And for me, it's about turning all the devices off, getting into bed, and finding a book that I enjoy. That's not a horror, it's not nothing too stimulating, but
Yeah.
a book that's useful, that's going to take me to another place. It's analog. There's no screens. I've probably got my blue blocking glasses on, so
Sure.
I'm filtering out all the blue light, and just taking that time to wind the brain and the nervous system down so that I'm more likely to drop off and stay asleep as opposed to wake up in the middle of the night and the brain's ticking and thoughts are going through my head, and that's normal. That'll happen to everybody at different stages. But
Sure.
my answer to that question is, how do you throttle back? So that's how I throttle back, but it's going to look different for different people. Somebody might go for a walk, someone might go for a hot bath because that helps bring core temperature down and sets you up for a better sleep. So
Yeah.
different courses for different horses, but find the thing that works for you that is your throttle back, because that's the bit that sets you up for the good sleep is that wind down. You might journal. So obviously meditation is the thing that works for you, James. And I've tried meditation, and it's not something that I'm very practiced at, and it's not something that I've sort of kept chipping away at. But journaling's an alternative way of having that introspection. So you can get your thoughts down onto paper. You can empty your head a little bit, so that helps set you up for a better night's sleep. But it also helps you think about yourself. There's that metacognition, thinking about thinking, and how your day went, what went on, what things are coming up. All that sort of stuff is another nice way of getting an opportunity to throttle back, so that when the head hits the pillow, you're more likely to drop off and have a good sleep.
I love that. It's a really nice analogy. And even though I have been meditating, a lot longer than probably most people, just because it's the ritual that really works for me. I love that there are different other rituals that people can use, like the journaling and the
Mm,
reading, and it just settles the
mm,
mind down quite a lot. I think that's really,
yeah.
really powerful. Can I ask a quick question? Because I just want
Mm,
to, sleep is, I think, so important. It's underrated.
yeah.
What about temperature of the room and things like that? You know, this is important, I believe.
Yeah. Yes, it is. The sweet spot is between 17 and 19 degrees Celsius.
Yeah.
So it needs to be on slightly on the cool side.
Can you
Um,
just tell us why? Because I know you're a man of like stats and stuff, and I love
mm,
this.
mm, yeah,
Tell us why 17 to 19 is this sweet spot.
yeah. So my understanding is that it relates to body temperature and sleep. So to drop off, we need to be about 1 degree cooler than we normally are. And
Right.
so that helps us drop into, and I'm the different brain waves and the whole
Yeah.
alpha, yeah, all that stuff. I can't rattle all of those off, but essentially it's about getting that body temperature down a little bit. And that's why a hot bath or a spa works so well, because you bring the blood to the outside of the body, which means your core temperature is going to drop a little bit. And that's a lovely way of setting yourself up for a good night's sleep. So you feel clean and you're getting into your crisp
Yeah.
sheets, and then your body temperature drops, and hey presto, it sets you up for a nice, easy drop off. So I think the room temperature just plays into that as well.
Yeah, I really I believe that big time because 2 years ago I remember it was a very hot summer in Spain, and I found it very difficult to have air conditioning on all the time. I just felt like it just
Mm,
didn't feel like flow of air through breathing. So I remember waking
mm.
up in the middle of the night having a cold shower, and 2 minutes
Yeah.
later after I got out of that I was
Right.
deep
Yeah.
sleep.
Yeah.
Obviously, the air temperature outside was warm at that time of year in the summer, but I remember just going, "Oh my golly!" Couldn't fall asleep, and then just
Mm,
wake up,
mm,
have a quick cold, cool shower, and then
mm.
off I went really, really quickly.
Yeah.
And I know that that played into the part of a successful next day, especially when you
Right.
need to perform. So I really, really think the sleep. Are there any other practical tools aside from sleep with you and your clients and the people that you've been helping? You thinking, hey, we can turn this around if you're struggling right now.
Talking to a guy yesterday actually on a call, and he's going through some challenges with work and energy. And one of the things that I suggested was that he get outside barefoot and walk around the garden, just to connect with the earth. So it's that grounding component where you're balancing the ions in the body. So you've got negative and positive ions in the body, and so by grounding yourself, you are able to pick up the negative ions in the soil, if you like, and the positive in the body rebalances. So you can do that in your back garden. You could walk to the ocean, walk along the beach in the ocean. So you've got the blue gym and the green gym. And those are really nice ways of helping balance the nervous system out. And the other thing that I suggested to him was that while he was doing the grounding, that he took the opportunity to observe nature around him. So we know that the Japanese sort of came up with this term forest bathing, and essentially it's about just being outside in nature, but observing things through all five senses. So what can I see? What can I hear? What can I smell, taste, and feel? And so that might mean brushing up against a leaf, but at least immersing yourself in nature for just a few minutes. It doesn't have to be a long period of time, but just enough time that will help reset the cortisol. That will bring the cortisol down. So if you're having a stressful day, get outside at lunchtime. You don't necessarily have to take your shoes off, but if it's convenient and you can take your shoes off, even better. Because that's just a real simple, easy one that you can add into your day and help balance things out a little bit.
I love this. The negative ions really help also reduce inflammation in the body.
Mm,
And
mm,
inflammation plays is one of the number one killers and stress-related diseases that we have.
yeah.
I had a little challenge this afternoon. I was feeling a little stressed for a period of time, and I couldn't even drive home because they're resurfacing the road where I
Oh
live, and
no.
I just moved out. It's not a big deal, right? And I don't really see things as a big deal. But when they said it was going to take some time before you can actually drive, another 100 meters before you can get home, I was like, oh,
Mm,
do you know what? There's something better I can do with my time. So I decided to just drive to the beach because the beach is like 5 minutes from my house.
nice.
So instead of waiting potentially for half an hour for them to resurface the road, which I'm grateful for, I could have just turned the car engine off and just sat there and just waited. But my body was saying, I think I need to just deeply relax rather than just sit
Mm,
here and think, come
mm.
on, hurry up, how long is it going to take? How many of us all been in some sort of situation that's fairly similar? Anyway, I went
Mm.
to the beach. I was there for 20 minutes. I even jumped in the water because it was a lovely day today. Um,
Nice.
and within 20 minutes, I'd just gone, okay, now I reckon I can go back. And obviously, the road had been paved on my way back. Happy days, less
Yeah.
stress, less cortisol in the body.
Mm.
Is it that easy, Rich, to be able to reset? That's my question to you because I know you come across a lot of people with all different types of challenges, but is it that easy to reset? Is what I'm asking, or does it take, a lot of consistency? That
I
was
think
my
it's a bit.
experience, right? And that's,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I've got
yeah.
a phone call, I've got business call, I've got emails to send, I've got people I have to speak to. I need to be on form. Usually
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna just push, push, push through. And how
Mm-hmm.
many of us do that? That was me
Yeah,
once upon a
yeah,
time,
yeah,
hands up. But I
yep.
don't do that anymore.
Mm. I think the answer is yes to both. You can reset very, very quickly in the moment. And I think breath is probably the quickest and easiest way of doing that. Let's say you're in a traffic jam and you can't jump out to the beach.
Yeah.
Using your breath, obviously, meditation is a great way of doing that because you focus on your breath, but you can do it anytime, anywhere. And I've got an anecdote actually. I was working with a guy this morning and he said, Rich, that breathing technique, I tell you what, it stops me punching people in meetings. He said, when you hold that breath before you breathe out again, honestly, it's making such a difference. And I was like, I had a little chuckle to myself as I'm glad you're not punching people. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's that powerful that you can shift from that parasympathetic, from the sympathetic into the parasympathetic extremely quickly. So momentarily, it will make a big difference, like it did for you, James, and everybody can. But that's sort of on a continuum of where you're at in the
Yeah.
bigger picture. So
Yeah.
from my point of view, historically, I was high with my cortisol, but I was there for so long, I then crashed and it was low. And that's not going to bounce back quickly.
Right.
But if you're feeling like you're in a stressed state, if you're feeling like things are slightly slipping out of control, doing something like what you did, getting yourself to the beach or just having some moments to take a breath is a nice quick
So
reset.
may
And
I ask what that breath technique that you shared with your client or
sure,
the
yeah,
person you were speaking with, who what was
yeah, it's I've been doing it for a long time, and it's with it. There's a guy called Dr. Andrew Weil
yeah,
or
yeah,
Weil,
Vile, yeah, yeah,
Weil.
yeah.
And he's a kooky guy. He's a really interesting guy,
He's
an
based off the
American dude,
North Shore in Oahu, not in Oahu,
Canadian,
in Hawaii. Yeah,
Hawaii. Yeah,
I've been up there,
yeah.
Princeville. Yeah, but
So
up in Kauai.
he's a good guy. He's even older than he looks.
Yeah.
He looks like he's about 18. He's like nearly 100. But
Okay.
so he came up with this breath technique, which you probably know what I'm going to say, is
Yeah.
4-7-8. So you breathe in for a count of four, you hold that for a count of seven, and then you breathe out for a count of eight. And the particular message with that is that the out breath is twice as long as the in breath. So we are signaling back to the parasympathetic nervous system that we're
Right.
safe, we're fine, we're calm, we're in a good place. And that seven in between just delays that process. So it's giving time for pressure on the diaphragm. The diaphragm's linked to the vagus nerve. Vagus nerve obviously helps push that parasympathetic state. So yeah, 4-7-8, it's a
So,
winner. And if
question. This is
people,
a yeah. I love that. Could you just tell us why it's like eight on the exhale and why that's important? Because people think, okay, I can breathe
yeah,
in for four, hold for seven, and exhale
yeah,
for eight. What? Why double on the exhale? Well, why is
yeah.
that important?
So when we breathe in, we signal our sympathetic nervous system. So imagine if you had a scare, you're watching a horror movie, that elevates your nervous system. So you go into that sympathetic state. When we breathe out, we signal to our parasympathetic nervous system. So what we're doing is we're biasing the breath technique so that we are pushing into that parasympathetic state more than the sympathetic state. You can't breathe without breathing in. So what we're doing is we are using the out breath as the signal to our nervous system to say, calm down, everything's fine, chill. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, it's a winner. And I often will have clients lying on a Shakti mat, and they're all nice and relaxed. And I go, right, breathe in 4-7, 4-7-8, do it for 3 or 4 rounds, and that will settle their nervous system, and happy days away they go. The other trick is dropping off to sleep. So if you're rolling around in bed, and that's not a great thing because you're training your brain to this is the place you roll around in bed rather than fall asleep, is the 4-7-8 technique in bed. So if you can't drop off because you've got a busy mind and you may not have throttled back quite as much as you could have done, 4-7-8 for about 2, 3, 4 rounds, and 99% of the time,
I've dropped off. So,
Okay, I'm going to try that tonight actually. So
yeah,
just doing it before you want to fall asleep will get you into perhaps a
Lower brainwave frequency.
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, and I think pulse is a component of it as well. So if you've had a heavy meal or of any alcohol, of course,
Right.
your pulse is going to be slightly elevated, and your brain's not going to let you drop off if you've got a racing pulse. So exercising too close to bedtime may not be great, but also food and drink can have can play into that. But a busy mind can too. So
Yeah.
if all those things are
This
eliminated,
is
then
actually a really good question, right? But you having studied energy and the science behind it, a busy mind, is that because you've eaten or exercised or had stimulants before bed? Is that the reason why the mind's busy before bed? If it is.
not necessarily, no.
Okay,
No,
this
I
is
think
interesting.
the busy mind is more about your thinking patterns as opposed to the eating and the drinking. Yeah. So how you process information, what meaning you give to your day, your interactions, the meaning that you make of everything really is what then means whether you've got a busy mind or a less busy mind. And I find my mind is busier when I've got a lot on my plate, when I've got a lot of work coming up, multiple things to be working on at the same time. If I've got a new challenge or a new project starting, then I've got a busy mind because my mind's going solution, 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 solution,
Sure.
rather than one step at a time, take it
Yeah.
gradually. No, no,
Yeah.
no, no, no. We're just going to fix this all up in one go. So, yeah, it's that's how it works for me.
I just want to say thank you because that's a really a great answer. I'm thinking about the burnout that people have been challenged with that seems a bit more socially acceptable, but it's not really something that we really have noticed in the last 20 or 30 years. It's just been a lot more recent people having this burnout. Why is that?
Generationally, people who sort of grew up in the 70s and the 80s and whose parents were, at work and when working really hard, picked up this work ethic that, you work yourself into the ground because that's what gets results and gives you the lifestyle that you want. And I think the next generation, so my children and their friends and colleagues, are next generation on going, why are you killing yourself?
Right.
They actually see it like that. And I think that that's the generational difference. And to answer your question, it's already been the way in which we operate as a generation, Generation X, of which I am. But roll in over the top of that, a pandemic, lockdowns, the lack of certainty, the unpredictability, which the brain doesn't like, right? That pushes us into that sympathetic state again. Then you've got the fallout of the economic conditions that have been the result of COVID. So we've got, businesses that were struggling through COVID. We've got businesses that are struggling because of COVID and the fallout of it now, and the economic corrections that have occurred. And so there hasn't really been a time in the last 5 years for people to stop. And I think that, on top of the mentality of push anyway, is a large contributor to why people are at where they're at. And I think, it's been a badge of honor. Oh yeah, I'll sleep when I'm dead. Well, that might be sooner than you'd like it to be. So I think it's a whole combination of factors, but I think those are the big ones.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I'm just a massive advocate of well-being as are you, Rich, and I'm fascinated to see what other little small things we could be adding to ourselves to improve the quality of our life, our family's life, just to be those examples of someone who's always got energy because the quality of our life is determined by our health, really.
Mm,
And
mm,
we can't
mm.
enjoy life if you ain't got your health. The difference between someone who's got incredible prosperity is looking at the same sunset as someone who has nothing.
Mm.
And ultimately, if you're doing that from a hospital bed, it's not quite the same thing. And so
No,
I'm
no.
really conscious to share as much of this energy information, which is pretty free, you know,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah,
simple.
yeah,
It just
yeah.
requires you showing up for you. And so, I'm fascinated by your work and what you've been doing. And Is there any other types of like practical tools you think that would really help people? If they're at a 6, for instance, or a 7, and you're thinking, oh, I could
Mm,
do with a little
mm,
bit more energy. I'm not bad,
mm,
but I could do. Everybody wants more energy because I believe on the other side of a lot of energy is all the things that you want. Takes a
mm,
lot of energy to do really, really well and have all the things you want show up. You have to be an energetic match.
mm,
So,
mm.
what are Rich's tools, aside from the ones you've mentioned today, that you think, hey, guys, you really want to be thinking about doing this?
I think the simple things, hydrating well. It's something we take for granted because you can just turn a tap on. But I'll get to 3 o'clock and go, oh shit, I haven't had any water. And I'll be downing 2 pints of water just to play catch up, which is the wrong thing to do. But hydration plays a massive part in our energy in terms of how well our brains are working. Cognition, even just I think the stats are something like a 2% drop in hydration is like an 11% drop in performance, something like that. So looking after
That
the simple
compounded
things.
is big, by the way.
Yeah, yeah, exactly that.
So on
So
on one of your videos, Rich, I really like this. Just share with some of your like little hacks that you have for people to be able to be reminded of certain things.
okay, so my water one, you
Yeah, yeah,
probably
yeah.
saw
That's the one. That's one of the ones I see.
you
But
know what?
like I
I've
like
got
these little hacks. It's all these little things
yeah,
that make
yeah,
us have to go, oh yeah, oh yeah. Because, like I have a certain alarm that I have, which is a bird tweet that wakes me up. I choose not
yes,
to have an alarm that scares me because I don't want cortisol running when I wake up. I actually sleep with an eye mask on, a silk one, but I leave
nice.
the curtains open, or not so wide, but so I wake up
Yeah,
with the sunrise.
yeah,
And so that gives me this
perfect.
beautiful entrance into the new day. And it's just like, oh,
Mm,
and I can just feel the sun coming up, the birds tweeting, and it's a
lovely.
lovely entrance into the new day. But you've got your hacks, and I
Yeah,
like them, and I
that's
want you
good.
to
That's
share.
good.
Do share your hacks. Come on.
Yeah, so normally if I'm sitting at this chair, I've got a pint glass sitting next to me on this mat, and it's not there
Right,
today.
right.
But
I love that
so
it's
yeah,
not there today.
and there's always opportunities to improve, right? Anyway, so
Always,
my pint
always.
glass is almost stitched to my hand most of the time. I have to admit, I've got about 5 or 6 of them in the cupboard just waiting to be filled up. But I keep one of them in the fridge, and the reason I keep one of them in the fridge is more than one reason. A, we're in a reasonably warm climate like you are, so it's nice to have a cold glass rather than a warm glass.
Yeah.
But the other thing is every time I open the fridge for breakfast or to grab some blueberries or whatever it might be, there's that glass staring me in the face going, time for some water. So I'll take the glass out, I'll fill it up with water, and I'll carry on with my day. And I take the pint glass because it's a big vessel. It's not going to run out and I don't have to go back every 5 minutes. And so that's my hack. The glass stays in the fridge. And so it's always there reminding me every time I open the fridge door. And if it's not in the fridge, I've already got it and I'm already on my day with my water. So the point being is that reduce the friction. How can you reduce the friction to do the thing you want to do so that you stumble over it every day? And the other classic example is if you want to become a runner, put your running shoes out the night before. It's the same sort of principle. So you can apply that to everything. You
It's
can apply
basically
that to all
intention,
sorts of
isn't it?
things.
It's massive intention.
Yep.
And I
Yep.
think that, I've got little notes that I leave around my house about what my goals are. I've got,
Mm,
I have my environment set up so it's neat and tidy, so my mind is neat and tidy.
mm, mm.
But I like these little hacks of like the water and stuff, like I watched your little hack the other day. I was like, yeah, I quite like that. Like I'm always looking for new reminders, right? Always looking for
Yeah.
new reminders. And I think
Yeah.
that we constantly needed to be reminded as a human species because we don't have it all sussed the whole time. Every day is a new day. Are you showing up as that best version of yourself again tomorrow? You know?
Mm, mm, mm. Yeah,
And
absolutely right.
excellence is a series of habits and a series of choices made over and over again. And I can tell that because I was very dysfunctional years and years ago, with having zero good habits. I was absolutely scattered. And now
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
just, that's it. And I just find myself with so much freedom. So operating at those higher levels of a 7 plus is, I think, a really, really beautiful way to have greater success, greater happiness, and greater fulfillment. And
Mm.
I love like your technical and scientific approaches to understanding a bit more of the adrenals, because we don't recognize what's actually going on with us sometimes.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. And the way I got that tested was through a saliva test. So the trick with understanding where your cortisol is to see the pattern, not to see one particular number in isolation. So often the doctor might get it tested, but that might have been at 11 o'clock in the morning. Well, that's
Right.
great. At 11 o'clock in the morning, it should be about here. But how does that correspond to what it's like in the morning, in the afternoon, and the evening? So there are ways and means of identifying these things without it being too invasive. And that was a real shock horror to me. And that's actually one of my slides in one of my presentations on energy is this is where I was at. And there's a black line across the bottom of the graph. And I should be up in this green bit here.
Yeah.
And so it's a real wake up call for people to say, oh, crikey, yeah, well, if I was down there, I'd be a four as well. So, it's not too difficult to find these things out. And once you get that information, it really is powerful.
Yeah, I think that once you see that, you go, "Hey, I can, something I can do, or there's
Mm,
something I
mm,
need to do,"
mm.
because you're being told now biologically as well.
Yeah,
So, if there's
yeah,
one
yeah.
key bit of advice that you'd like to share, just in closing, what would it be to people going, "Yeah, I love what Rich has said. It makes so much sense. Of course, it makes sense. Energy is, our most greatest asset that we can have." What's one key bit of advice that they could have in thinking I could improve the amount of energy that I'm allowing with your work and what you share, Rich?
It's one that we haven't talked about, but I think it's one that has so many other benefits. And you hinted at it with your curtains, the fact that you allow the light to do its job and sort of set your circadian rhythm for the day. And
Mm,
that is just to get outside into natural light in the morning once the sun has come up, because it plays such an important role in what happens at the end of the day. It bookmarks your day. So you get outside, you get the natural light into your eyes. That makes you less sleepy in itself because it washes away the melatonin from the night before.
okay.
Because sometimes if you don't, you go from the car to the office car home, particularly in the morning, you could be quite sleepy and groggy and be grabbing for that first cup of coffee because you haven't got that natural light into your eyes. So that natural light could be where you have your first cup of tea, or you might eat your breakfast outside, or even go for a walk. And that bookends your day. So your brain says, right, beginning of the day is now. 16 hours later, it goes, okay, it's probably about time for bed now. And so I think that really helps reinforce the circadian rhythm so that you've got a really strong reference between when you've woken up and when you're going to bed. And that will help design that sort of that wind down, the throttle back at the end of the day, because your brain will be communicating to you. It will be telling you it's time to sleep. It'll be telling you that you're tired because it's 16 hours since you saw light. So I think that would be my go-to would be to get that light in
How
first
long,
and
how long, how much light do you actually need, Rich? That
real.
morning slot.
Yeah, not long. I think the science says somewhere between 7 and 10 minutes. So you're not talking
Right.
significant amounts of time. And also, it has to be outside. You can't do it through a car window. You can't do it through an office window. You have got to be out there because the lux, the measure of light between inside and outside is significantly different. So between, let's say, 100 inside and 95,000 outside. So you've got to be out there and let your brain, let the nature take its course because the blue light that comes with the natural light from the sun, even an overcast day is sufficient. It makes a big difference to how things go from
And what's
there.
actually happening to the brain then during that time?
So light is always on a spectrum, and so blue light is the most stimulating to our brain. And so what it's doing is it's signaling to our brain that the day has started and the night has finished. And so part of that process is that melatonin is then the blue light signals to the brain, oh, we don't need any more melatonin because that's a sleep thing and it's not sleep time. So melatonin then gets reduced, which immediately increases your alertness because melatonin's job is to help you sleep. So it's not something that you can take for granted, because at nighttime, if we've got all the lights on and the TV on and the screens on, melatonin's less likely to build up to the level that's going to help you set yourself off for a good night's sleep. But blocking that light at nighttime will help set you up for a better night's sleep. So in the morning, your brain's getting that blue light from the sun and the atmosphere and saying, right, it's daytime. And so the clock starts ticking. And what happens then is adenosine, which is another signaler in the body, starts building up, which helps create sleep pressure. So you're getting rid of melatonin and you're starting the clock on this adenosine. And the adenosine builds up over the course of the day and it creates what's known as sleep pressure. Now we can block adenosine with caffeine, so it's got the same, imagine it, a piece of Lego slotting into your brain. It does the same thing as adenosine. So if you drink lots of caffeine, that will slow that process down. So if you've got some work on and you need to really focus, then caffeine can be useful. But if not, it's gonna prevent you having a better night's sleep. So there's a couple of things going on there. The suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is the master clock in our brain, then sends signals to other parts of the brain, other parts of the body, because all of our cells have their own sort of circadian rhythm. But that bright light signals that master clock, and then the master clock controls everything else that goes on in the brain and the body. So it's a really powerful one, and it's one that we kind of take for granted. We don't really think, oh yeah, I'll go outside, or yeah. If we don't, then we're missing an opportunity.
Amazing.
Mhm.
Rich, it's been an absolute joy speaking with you. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and your wisdom. And I'd also like to say I really appreciate all the science behind it, and I find it really fascinating. So thank you for sharing. This week's Super Soul model is Rich Ellis. Thanks, Rich.
Thank you, James.